Hello, YouTubers. Today I'm going to do a ranking on each doc on favorite Doctor seasons, and today I'll be doing my rankings on the John Pertwee year of the show, as this year marks the 50th anniversary of John Pertwee's departure from the show. So as John Pertwee is like one of my favorite classic series doctors of all time, so I'm gonna be honest here. I don't think there really was a bad season from this era. I think all of John Pertwee's seasons are great. I don't think there ever was a really bad one. So let's begin. So at number 5 we have season 9. Now don't get me wrong. I like the season. I think it's a pretty good season. I don't think it is as good as like his first two seasons or his last two seasons. Like season 9 has its flaws here and there, but it does have some really good standout episodes like Day of the Daleks and the Sea Devils, which are the two most recognizable episodes from that season. And then it's just got its like it does have its decent episodes, but are clunkers and then here and there. But it's still really good. Like I like Day of the Daleks. I think it was a really nice return to see the Daleks come back after a 5-year rest. So it's nice to see those guys return. The original voices that they had during the broadcasting, I don't mind it. I think it was really nice. But people really complain about it, just like they complain about how the Cybermen spoke in The Wheel in Space and Revenge of the Cybermen, but it doesn't bother me at all. Day of the Daleks, I think, is a great story. It's such a fun, action-packed story. I think it's a really underrated story, and I think it deserves more appreciation than it gets. I really love the Gold Supreme Dalek. I think it's such a beautiful color design. It really acts like what the Bronze Daleks were going to look like in the future. What the Bronze Daleks were going to look like. So yeah, I like it. The Curse of Peladon, another good story. It was nice to see the Sea Devils come back. It was nice to see that we got more of the Ice Lord as well. I liked how they went for a different approach with with the Ice Warriors, making them more like good guys in this. I think it just shows you that I really like that story, how it showed that the monsters, that even villains like the Ice Warriors do have a good side in them, and I think half the problem is that they just misunderstood, but the story does have its clunkers, I feel like the main villain being killed off I think around part 2 or 3 was just way too soon. I think they should have kept him on right to the very end. I think that was disappointing. I think that shrunken head, the villain who had that shrunken head in that machine thing, really creeped me out. It just looked really creepy looking. So yeah, The Curse of Peladon is a good story, but it does have its clunkers, but still pretty decent. Not one of the best John Pertwee stories, but still pretty decent. Then we got The Sea Devils, which is probably, in my opinion, the best story of this season. Like, the sword fight against John Pertwee and Roger Delgado is absolutely really well done. I think they did it. They did their own stunts for that scene. There was no stunt doubles at all. The Sea Devils are such fantastic looking creatures. I think they are such a great monster. I find the Sea Devils to be really underrated. I'm so glad they came back for Legend of the Sea Devils for the Jolly Whittaker specials, or aka the prior 60th anniversary special. So I'm glad that Chris Chibnall brought them back to being, as they hadn't been seen since Warriors of the Deep of Peter Davison's final season. So it was nice to see them come back. Overall, I consider the Sea Devils like the real standout story for that season, and the most recognizable story of that season. Then we got The Mutants. Again, that's another really good story. I think it's better than The Curse of Peladon, but again, it does have its clunkers here and there. I think it's a really good story. Not one of the best. It's a little bit better than The Curse of Peladon, but The only problem I have with that story, it's just really forgetful, but still really decent. I think now that season 9's got released on Blu-ray, I might give it a rewatch. I think my opinion may change. May change on that. Change on that someday. So who knows, maybe if I give it a rewatch. The Time Monster, I really don't get into it. It's a really shitty story, probably like one of the worst stories of the original series. Like, the only good thing about it was the acting and the chemistry between John Pertwee and Roger Delgado, and that was it. It was just so boring that I actually watched it twice, and I actually fell asleep when watching it. I consider it such a disappointing. I think that's what really let season 9 down was the Time Monster, and I feel like that story really let it down. But overall, like, season 9 is a pretty good season. Not the best, but still pretty good. I think the problem why I consider it Pertwee's weakest season is just because it's stuck in between. It was just stuck in between season 7 and 8 and seasons 10 and 11. So overall, while not one of the best classic series seasons, but still a pretty good season, a fun one with 2 great standout episodes. So at number 4, we have season 11. This season got a lot of hate from a lot of fans. I find this season to be really underrated and unappreciated. In my opinion, I think that season 11 is a great season, and I think it deserves more appreciation than it gets. I really hope that this season gets released on Blu-ray for next year, because it is such a great, it's a fun season, and what they did, I know that John Pertwee had a lot of back problems during this productions of this season, but I think I still think it's a fun season for what they did. I know that John Pertwee looks like he's not enjoying the show anymore, considering that he had been playing the role for like 5 years and 5 seasons. Like, basically, he was the first actor to go past the 3-season myth, and like he was the first one to do it, which his successor would follow on with that. But overall, so let's begin. What I like about it. The Time Warrior is such a fantastic debut to his final season. I really love the Sultan in this story. Like Commander Lynx is such a fantastic villain. He comes across as very intimidating and threatening. It was such a fantastic debut to Sarah Jane Smith, which is such an iconic classic series companion. I loved how the sword fights and all that stuff. I loved how it was set in medieval times. It's a fun story, and yep, really fantastic story. I love it. The locations that are fantastic, really fun really fantastic story, and was just so enjoyable to watch. I definitely would watch that story again. It is a fantastic story. And then we've got Invasion of the Dinosaurs, which is another pretty good story. Not the best. I don't think the Invasion of the Dinosaurs is a bad story at all. I think it's underrated, but not one of the best John Pertwee stories. I still think it's a decent story. The only thing I didn't like about in that story was that Captain Yacht's betraying Unit. I feel like that was just a real big mistake there. I think that was a big mistake. Like, considering he was one of the Unit team, and I feel like him betraying them was really messed up. What they did there, that was such a big mistake. They should have not have done that. So overall, but Invasion of Dinosaurs is still a pretty decent story. But again, not the best John Pertwee story of all time. Then we got Death to the Daleks, which is actually one of my favourite John Pertwee stories of all time. That is such a really underrated and unappreciated story. I really love how the Daleks look in that story. I love the silver and black colour scheme on the Daleks. Like how they went for a different approach. Like, they sort of act like that colour scheme acts like a mix between the 60s design and the dark grey 70s design. dark grey 70s and 1980s design. So yeah, really like it. I think the Daleks were really funny in that story. Have them like one Dalek throwing a tantrum and rolling around in circles. That was pretty funny. So yeah, and Death of the Daleks is a fantastic story. I think that, in my opinion, that's probably like the best Dalek story out of the Pertwee era. In my opinion, it's a fun story, and I just love it. Seeing the Daleks being weaponry is actually quite a new take to show how they can survive just without their weaponry. So yeah, really fantastic story. And Death of the Daleks is such an underrated and unappreciated story, in my opinion, and I think it deserves more appreciation than it really deserves more appreciation. And then we got Monster Peladon, another really underrated story. I really enjoy that story. I love John Pertwee's costume that he wore in that story. The dark green, olive velvet smoking jacket, the brown double-waisted waistcoat, green shirt, black bow tie, brown trousers. I just love that. That's one of my favourite looks to his Doctor. I love how the Ice Warriors act more like villains in that story, and I think I prefer them a lot more in that story than the Curse of Peladon. So yeah, sadly, the Monster Peladon would be the Ice Warriors' last appearance in the original series until they come back for Cold War of Matt Smith's final season. So yeah, overall, Monster Peladon, fantastic story. It's another underrated story, and I think it deserves more appreciation than it gets. And then we got Planet Spiders. Fantastic story. Really love it. It's fun, action-packed. It's dark. It does. I really am terrified of the spiders, considering someone who has arachnophobia. So that's why I get creeped out by the spiders, even though I know they're animatronic puppets. But they still creep me out. The Great One is such a fantastic villain. It sort of represents your biggest fears. I love how John Pertwee's final dialogue is beautiful. What he says to Sarah Jane Smith, and it was such a fantastic debut. And I loved I loved how the term regeneration is used in that story. It was nice that, and the ending of Part 6 was such a fantastic debut to Tom Baker's Doctor. So yeah, it is fantastic story. I love how Pertwee got the biggest request he won for that story, like using gadget weapon trees and different vehicles, kung fu's and all that stuff. And if you look at it, I feel like there was a huge story arc going on in this season, like basically starting from the Green Death with the Metahuman crystals. Like that story, Green Death, starting from Green Death, like from Time Warrior up to Planet of Spiders, all those stories were leading up to the events of Planet of Spiders. So yeah, nice, fantastic story of Planet of Spiders. One of my favourite John Pertwee stories, and it was such a fantastic closer to John Pertwee's Doctor. So now we're into number 3, and here we got season 8. This is another great season. I like it. I love how it went for a more different approach. I love the Earthbound setting of it, Earthbound setting. The Blu-ray release of this season made this season even more popular. I really wanted to get this season out on Blu-ray, but sadly it sold out very quickly, as it is a really strong season. Terror of the Autons, great story, such a great debut to the Master. Nice, Roger Delgado and John Pertwee worked so well together. It was a nice, great debut to Joe Grant, who's another iconic classic series companion. So yeah, I'm not a fan of those big smiley masks that the Autons wear. I don't like it quite a bit. And the Blu-ray release of Terror of the Autons giving us the nesting form in the Blu-ray edition makes it look so much better. And seeing it as this giant octopus-like creature, giving it what it fully looks like. For someone who loves cephalopods, it's such a beautiful design in CGI for what they did. So yeah, The Mind of Evil, fantastic story, really underrated story. I love how this machine kind of messes with people's mind, discovering their like biggest fears and all that stuff, and all their traumas and stuff. That's such an underrated story. I love how that the BBC put a lot of effort to recolorize it into color, as all 6 parts of that story were all in black and white. So I'm glad that when it came out on DVD, it was nice to see it in color. The Mind of Evil is such a fantastic story. One of my favorite John Pertwee stories. It's such an underrated, unappreciated story. So I'm glad I watched that story. It's a fantastic story. Claws of Axos, another great story. I love the axons in it, and the most terrifying part was when they showed the doctor showing Joe Grant aging really severely. That was like really messed up on many levels. So yeah, I don't have much to say about it, but I can say Claws of Axos, it's a great story. I really enjoy that one. And then we got Colin Space, a really underrated story. That story, again, got a lot of hate. The reason why that story is underrated, because it's overshadowed by stories like Terror of the Autons, Claws of Axos, and the Demons from that season, but it's still another really good story. And I love how, again, it's not one of the best John Pertwee stories, but it's still a really good story. I would probably watch that story a lot more than stories like Curse of Peladon, The Mutants Invasion of Dinosaurs. So yeah, a really good story, but not the best. All I can say. Then we got The Demons, fantastic season final. This was basically, The Demons was basically the last story to be a 5-parter. The Demons is, I don't know what that demon creature's name was again, but overall, it's a fantastic story. It's got such a Stephen King feeling to it. That's what I love about it. It's dark. It's dark. It's got a very horror theme to it. And then when I watch it, just gives me a lot of Stephen King vibes to it. So yeah, it is a fantastic story and such a fantastic season final to such a great season. So yeah, and I love how the third Doctor makes Bessie move on her own, like using that remote control. It just sort of remind me of Hobie the Love Bug a bit. So yeah, even though the Demons did come out like, I think about 2 years after the Love Bug came out. So yeah, I can see why. And then at number 2, we have season 10. Fantastic season, one of my favorite classic series seasons of all time. I consider this to be like John Pertwee's second best season. It's a fun season from beginning to end. It was nice to see the Doctor traveling in time and space again. 3 Doctors, fantastic start to the 10th anniversary year. It was nice to see both William Hartnell and Pat Troughton again, even though William Hartnell wasn't in it that much as Pat Troughton, but that was all due to his poor health, and I really wish he was in the story a little bit more, but what can you do? Omega is such a fantastic villain. And the Seal Guards are pretty weird-looking creatures, but they're still fascinating. It was a fantastic story, such a fantastic start to season 10. So yeah, and then we've got Carnival Monsters, another great story. I love the Jurassic. It was nice to see cameos from like the Cybermen, the Drat, and the Daleks guards, and yeah, and it was a fun story. I love seeing how the third Doctor went into hand-to-hand combat with that guy who would later on play Harry Sullivan in the Tom Baker era of the show. So yeah, it was a great story. I really enjoyed that one. The Jurassics are such fantastic looking creatures. I would love to see them come back for the modern series someday. And then we got Frontier in Space, really fantastic story. I really like it. It's just fantastic. It had everything in it. Like it had the Master teaming up with the Daleks. Sadly, this story would be the last of many things. It would be the last appearance of Roger Delgado as the Master, as he died in a car crash while on holiday in Turkey during John Pertwee's 4th year. And it was also the last appearance of the Gold Supreme Dalek, as it was never seen again after that story. So yeah, it's a great story, and it's a fantastic story. That's why a lot of people reappreciate that story a lot more, considering it was the lot. I can see why a lot of people love that story, considering it was the last story to feature Roger Delgado as the Master. So yeah, fantastic story. Fun, enjoyable from beginning to the end. And then we got Planet Daleks, another great story. A lot more better than Day of Daleks. I feel like the Dalek stories in the Pertwee era were just getting better and better and better. And so yeah, I love the the Supreme Dalek Council. Such fantastic dying. It was a reuse of the Gold Dalek from the Peter Cushing movie. So yeah, just how it lost its temper, saying, "You app out, the Supreme Council doesn't accept failing killing other Daleks." So yeah, I also love John Pertwee's costume in that story. Love the purple and pink color. Another one of my favorite costumes to his Doctor. And then we got Green Death, fantastic season final. Season 10, the giant green mags look great. And then and how he gets the metamine crystals, which were often like foreshadowing the events of his regeneration for the next season. And I love how he did all those Kung Fu men. It was so funny. The Third Doctor dress up as an old lady, and how he said to Captain Jones, "Good." When he says, "Oh, I like your bag," he says, "Good. I'll love to smack you with it." It was just hilarious. Overall, Green Death is a fantastic final, fantastic story, and such a fantastic final to season 10. It is another one of my favorite John Pertwee stories of all time. So yeah, and I loved how the Third Doctor had several disguises, how he disguised himself as a milkman. So yeah, and how he put on that Irish accent. So yeah, fantastic story. And then at number 1, you guessed it, season 7. I agree with many fans. Season 7 is a fantastic season. This was the first season to bring a whole new look to the show. The first season to be in color. What I love about it, it's dark, fun and action-packed. Spirit on Slays, such a fantastic story, fantastic debut story to John Pertwee's Doctor, and a fantastic story to bring the show to colour. That was the first story to bring a whole new look to the show, so yeah. The Autons, they are so intimidating and threatening in that story, and I would love to see more stories evolving around the Autons in the future. Who knows? I know that they were originally supposed to be the main villains in the Series 12 episode of Jodie Whittaker's second season for Puxus, but they got cut out at the last minute. I really wish they were in that story. It would have made that story even better. Then we have Doctor Who and the Silurians, fantastic story. The Silurians design in that story is fantastic. In my opinion, the classic series design of the Silurians is so much better than the modern series design. If they were to have a story around the Silurians, bring them back as that design. It just suits them a lot. I know in behind the scenes they were going to go for the classic series design for the Silurians when they were in early productions for Matt Smith's first season, but they decided to change it at the last minute. And then we got Best of Death, which is a really underrated story. That's another fantastic story. It's a fun story. It's dark. That's what I like about it. Horror story. It's really underrated. I'm so glad that the BBC had fully restored it into colour. Again, I'm so glad they did it. And seeing what it looks like in fully colour. So I'm glad they did that. I would watch that story over and over again. It's such a fantastic story. Really underrated. Underrated and unappreciated. Then we got Inferno. A really fantastic story. That story had such a James Bond and Stephen King feeling to it. It was action-packed, but also dark as well. And how that Cynoscope became badly infected, transforming into this wolf-like creature. So yeah. And I love this was like the first story to be set in a parallel universe, which would later be influenced for which they later that idea that story will be a huge influence for the David Tennant era of the show. So yeah, which we later explore the Doctor traveling to a parallel universe in Rise of Slow and the Age of Steel of David Tennant's first season. So yeah, Inferno is such a fantastic season final to such a fantastic season. Overall, I love season 7, and I agree with many fans. It's a fantastic season, and one of my favorite classic series seasons of all time. And I agree with many fans. It is definitely John Pertwee's best season. It's fun, action packed. It's dark, everything you want, and it really acted like the prototype John Pertwee season. And really, it was the first season to bring a whole new look to the show. I honestly do not see that season getting released on Blu-ray next. I feel like that season 7 will most likely be the last season to be released on Blu-ray. But that's just my opinion. And I really love John Pertwee's costume in that season. I love the dark, deep navy blue velvet smoking jacket, the black cravat, the white shirt, the black cloak with the red lining. It had such a mix of a James Bond and Count Dracula feeling to it. So yeah, and the chemistry between between the Third Dog and Liz Shaw works so well. It's such a shame that we never saw Liz Shaw after Inferno. Like, she was really never seen again. Such a really underrated, unappreciated companion. So yeah, I would have loved to see a little bit more Liz Shaw. Overall, that is my entire ranking of the John Pertwee. I shall see you next time for my rankings on the Tom Baker seasons. Later now, and bye now, it's forever. This is Duke Kato signing off. Bye.